watch the Genres panel, hosted by the lovely Lindy Cameron. And I'll let you take it away, Lindy. What do you think?
Everyone can read this. I don't
Okay, welcome everyone. As Izzy said, I'm Lindy Cameron and I'm a writer and a publisher. And I publish genre fiction. I write and I publish genre fiction. So to me, the discussion that we're kind of going to see what we're going to meander, you know, sort of wing it a bit, because one person on the panel thought that a discussion about genre was kind of a discussion between genre and literary fiction. That was Nigel, and I laugh at that. Laugh! I laugh at capital L literature. So I figure that the panel will be more about the different ways that we are tackling different aspects of whatever genre it is that we pick up, with the queerness that we add to it. Whether, like in my instance, I write lesbian, crime or sci-fi, and in your case,
I blend genres.
we have a genre blender.
Critics have
Yes.
said, what genre is this?
Yeah. So this is Kevin, by the way. And then we have Nigel, whose first novel is a crime novel. And he said earlier in the erotica panel, or after it, that he doesn't write the sex part, but he does have a gay character, a main gay character, and he's been published by like a real publisher.
Exciting!
the sex, do you go off, just fade to black, or
there's no sex in it.
Yeah.
That's no sex.
It's just his main character happens to be gay, but there's no.
So there's no romance, or there's no sex?
Neither.
Neither.
Well, I'm not sure there is no romance actually, but it's not explicit.
Yeah.
I just.
Yeah.
And then on the end we had Beanie, who.
Paranormal, really.
So the genres are quite different. So I think we'll be talking about how we bring our sensibilities, whatever they are, whether they're having a gay character who avoids the sex because it's a crime novel. You know, I mean, a lot of people write crime novels and there is no sex in them because it's not an erotic novel or it's not a romance. It's a crime novel. So it's really welcome to me, because I'm also a convener of Sisters in Crime, to actually discover that that a mainstream publisher is actually taking on. A mainstream publisher took me on a long time ago. My 3-book lesbian detective novel was published by HarperCollins. And now you've got, Nigel, who's your publisher?
That's
Random House. And mine was lesbian romance. Mine had like sex in it. And this was back in the late 90s. It was like, I know. Were lesbians even having sex back then? Yes. The titles were Blood, Guilt, Bleeding Hearts, and Thicker Than Water.
Right.
And so the first book had a lot of sex in it. The second one had a little bit less, and the third one had a little bit less because the characters were developed by then. The first sex scene had to be enormous because that's what you were supposed to do in those days. But for me, it's really refreshing to see that a publishing company like Random House has taken on Nigel's book, where it's got nothing to do with the sex, but it's perfectly okay to have a main character who is gay. So yay you and yay us as well. So, and we'll all do a little bit of a reading as well. So do you want to go first for Beanie so that you can decide whether you want to stay sitting there or not? You're quite welcome to stay.
Beanie, do you want to intervene?
And
Look, I made it huge!
Yes. and a bit of context for the story, please,
Yes.
Beanie.
Okay, so it's from Aidan Shepherd, which is the first book in Paws of Magic. It's about Aidan, who finds a dog that's sort of come out of a van. He's all injured. He takes the dog with him, not realising that it's actually a sheepdog. The dog is a German Shepherd, so there's like a comment in there about German Shepherds. And yeah, it's the first in the series. The third one should be coming out soon if the muses talk to me.
And just to clarify, is this male?
Yep.
Right.
Thanks, buddy, but now we need to get up. Aidan said, doing just that. We can't skip going to the pet store. You need bowls, food, toys, a collar and a leash. Maybe we can find you one of those few outfits. I've seen photos of a German Shepherd wearing a Superman outfit. Maybe we'll be lucky in the pet store and have one in your size. Aidan chuckled, quickly making his way to the attached bathroom, while Lex stood on the bed growling and barking at him. Okay, you're right, Superman was a bad choice. Batman it is. Aidan continued to laugh as he closed the door before turning to relieve himself. Lex still barked at him from the other room. He brushed his teeth and went through the rest of his morning routine before making his way back into the bedroom. Lex was on the bed looking at the bathroom door. As soon as Aidan walked out, Lex growled and snarled at him. Surprisingly, Aidan just laughed. Something told him Lex wouldn't hurt him, and that made him comfortable enough to laugh and relax. He ignored Lex's growls and went to his small dresser, grabbing some clothes and getting changed. He turned to look at Lex, who was sitting quietly on his bed watching him. Aidan walked up to him and started to check him over for any scratches, something he should have done earlier. I'm sorry I didn't check you for damage earlier, Lex. But on the bright side, it looks like you have very minimal scratches, which is surprising considering you fell out of the back of the van with a crazy-ass driver. You don't seem to have any broken bones, so that's something. It doesn't explain where the blood came from, but you seem to be okay. Are you okay? Aidan stopped examining him and looked into Lex's eyes. He barked once, then waved his tail. Okay, Lex, let's go and have some breakfast. Then we can go to the pet store for you and the grocery store for both of us. Lex barked, then followed Aidan out and turned and made his way out of the bedroom. Wow, it's almost like he can really understand me. Pity he's not like Lex from Grand Story. Sorry, it gets fuzzy down the bottom. Start again. Last sentence. Wow, it's almost like he can really understand me. Pity he's not like Lex from Grand Story. I'll go so that you can shine.
Nigel, would you like to read a bit?
Sure.
Okay.
So, my story is called King of the Road. The main character is David Kingsgrove, who's 35 years old, a gay man, and looking after Andrew, his 11-year-old nephew, for the weekend, and Andrew goes missing. So this is from the prologue. I still have a photograph of Andrew in my wallet, although it's not the one I used to keep there. It's the same Andrew, his eyes scrunched into narrow slits, his brown hair turning blonde at the tips. But I don't want to draw any attention. A man in his 30s with a picture of a shirtless young boy. It doesn't look right. So I've replaced the photo with another taken on the same day. This picture is almost identical, except that he's wearing his t-shirt. The blue, yellow and brown stripes mimicking the sky, sand and his skin. I imagine people would look at it and think, cute little boy. But I look at it and think, Andrew. I've wondered about ditching it altogether, just to be on the safe side. But I have this fear I'll forget what he looks like. I don't know if that really happens, if the way someone looks can simply be erased from your mind. I'm not taking any chances though. The other day I found myself in a sweat and had to pull off the highway, scrabbling for my wallet, and staring at the picture to remind myself. Afterwards I felt breathless and dizzy, all because I'd been gripped by this idea that the person I'd been picturing as Andrew was some other boy, someone else's nephew. I'm not normally given to anxiety, at least I never used to be, but then nothing's normal anymore. I have other pictures of Andrew around the flat, in places you'd expect to find them. One of his school photos is next to the sofa. He's sitting cross-legged in the front row, his arms folded tightly across his stomach, his back straight and his chest puffed out fit to burst. He's frowning furiously and his lips are pursed together as if any noise he might emit would get him into big trouble. He's often in trouble at school. Nothing serious, but the kind of Andrew, please trouble that leaves teachers exasperated as they're lining up in class for their bus ride to the museum. There's another school picture of him taken more recently, this time on his own and beaming at the camera. No sign of whatever adolescent storm clouds might be gathering on his horizon. And on the fridge there's a painting he did years ago. It made me smile when he presented it to me. It's like something I'd have painted at age 5. A house with a front door and a rectangular window on either side. The house is yellow and the roof is red, because roofs are red. To the right is a tree, a thin stick of brown with a green broccoli-shaped top, dotted with red circles for apples, the watercolours running murkily together where they meet. The top right corner of the paper is where the sun sits, bright yellow and with spines sticking out at precise intervals all the way around. And along the top is the sky, an inch-wide strip of the most vivid blue imaginable. It's a beautiful blue, but you wouldn't want your living room made. I'll always treasure these reminders of Andrew. It's said that the best things in life aren't things, but I can only partly agree. Because yes, my car, my flat, the remote control fan that kept me cool at night, I couldn't give a rat's ass about them. But the photographs, the paintings, the calendar with pictures of the Australian beaches that Andrew gave me for my last birthday, suddenly they're the best things in my life. There'd be no replacing them if the flat burnt down, or if, for whatever reason, someone took them away. It's not as if Andrew's around to give them to me again. But I have to be careful of thinking like that. There's no saying Andy's gone for good. There's no saying he's dead or that I'll never see him again.
How do I follow that? Look, I'm going to read from my second novel, Drama Queens and Adult Themes. And basically, as far as mixing genres go, in the first two chapters we find out that Adam and Wade have been together for 18 years. And chapter 1 starts with Adam in art class, sort of salivating over the nude male model, a young guy called Mannix. And by the end of the second chapter, they strike up a friendship. But then chapter 3 begins, written by a completely different character named Ipan. In the context of everything you've read thus far, our part of the story is going to seem out of place. Like someone has accidentally mixed up the pages of two accounts that have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Let me assure you, this is a very significant part of the tale. What type of name is Ipan, you're probably asking yourself. Sounds like a court jester or a Lord of the Dark, perhaps. Let me point out here and now that in this part of the yarn, I'm the good guy. And although this part of the story takes place far from the mortal world of Mannix, Adam and Wade, it's where this story truly begins. It all started when I was visiting my fellow warlock, Fabian, who insisted I come and take a look at his new spell. Let me put Fabian into words. Mischievous, self-centred, lack of empathy. You get the picture. He resides in a large tent made of gloss black material, a colour that matches his soul at times. There's all sorts of macabre fixtures, like a stuffed tiger's head sitting on top of a caged armadillo. His furniture squeaks or creaks constantly, plus there's that musty bachelor odour that occurs from lack of dusting. I was often wary of Fabian's spells and asked him what tomfoolery he was up to as I studied the layout on the table in his marquee. No tomfoolery, he replied, just a social experiment. We considered his collection of wooden dolls and magic tokens. One carved redwood artefact had a strong jawline and a naked body. His head jagged into little spikes at the peak. Does he wear too much hair gel, Fabian? It's a crown. Is he a prince of some sort? I was thinking more of a king of his own world. He's young. He's at an age where he believes he's invincible. A teenager. Add about 10 to 15 years, Ipan. The other figure in his face only had a set of eyes, which stared back at the younger man like a jeweller pricing a precious ring for a customer, knowing it was an item he couldn't afford. Remarkable work on the eyes, Fabian. Are you going to carve the rest of the face? I intended to, but somehow I stopped at the eyes. They seem to say it all. Like I said, remarkable work. This particular sculpture was more rounded than the first, so I deduced he was older. His right hand clutched a real set of old keys. Grime had settled on their shiny outline, as dust would settle on vintage wine bottles. I bent down and studied the layout carefully, making sure that nothing was added that might complicate the magic charm. It's lovely, I said. Two single people about to fall in love. I'm proud of you. Simple passion with no complications. The corner of Fabian's mouth turned up, but he straightened it immediately. What have you done? Nothing that would usually complicate the lives of gay men. One of them isn't single, I alleged. He nodded. At a guess, it's the older chap, isn't it? He nodded again. Is it an unhappy marriage? No, he's quite settled. I see. I turned away from the malicious sculptures. So you are up to mischief. Ipan, look at it this way. Adam is set in his ways. He needs to feel young again. Mannix is just the injection of youth he needs. Time and time again, I'm sickened by your desire to use mortals as your own personal playthings. Are you out of your mind? The man is in a relationship. He doesn't need another. He's getting boring. Trust me, he needs an affair. He's a 21st century gay man after all. What's he doing in a monogamous relationship? He needs to live a little. Boring or not, there are ways you can add spice to his life without an affair. Oh yes, like what? He can feel young again just by doing something childlike. Flying a kite, perhaps. How very Mary Poppins of him. A good night out then, stimulating conversation. Yes, the meaning of life mixed in with remarks on world politics. At least it's the adult thing to do, I barked. Adult? Helping a younger man in the skills of lovemaking is a very adult thing to do. Adam can teach Mannix to talk dirty with better vocabulary. After all, there's nothing more adult than the act of prolonged passion. Two willing bodies licking, tasting, suckling. I get the picture, Fabian. They can lick, taste and suckle all they want, just not with each other. I pan. One day you're going to become so small-minded your halo will slip down over your head and choke you. I murmured. If I had the power to reverse your dangerous spell, I would. Fabian smirked. His social experiment could not be turned around until he was tired of it. And sadly, there was plenty of mileage in this hex.
Right, you're going to get the first lesbian for the day.
Yay!
I'll just read a bit from the start. This is my the only short story I've ever written, and it came out to 15,000 words. So I've discovered I can't write short stories. Just a bit of a background on it. I actually started writing this in about 1998 as a thing to read at a festival. And the progression of the festival was there was 5 people on the panel, and we were doing like the history of writing. So Kerry Greenwood, for instance, told a story about writing something with a pen and ink, and then the next person was writing a story on a typewriter, and then it went to a computer, and then mine was just simply a story set in cyberspace, which was like really groovy then. And so this story has lots of cyberspace in it, but I ultimately finished it only a few years ago, and then climate change had happened, so there's that in here as well, which is why it ended up being 15,000 words and not 5. So the airboat splashed to a stop outside the dilapidated facade of 223 Collins Street. I hadn't said a word, but the pilot had rightly figured this was the place to drop me. Even without the 5 cops providing crowd control on the dock out front, I knew it was the right place to be too, because I'd been here before. I also knew I was about to face one of those dreaded moments when the victim at the scene was someone with whom I'd been acquainted. I powered up my anti-grav pod, hauled myself into the seat and strapped in. The idiots loitering in the drizzle, hoping to catch a glimpse of something dead, really pissed me off. I made a close calculation and just cleared the heads of the nearest onlookers. I did shout, "Look out," so it wasn't entirely my fault that half of them ended up face down on the wet promenade. "Thought they revoked your licence for that thing," Officer Jordan said. "Just a wild rumour," I said over my shoulder as I hovered towards the lift. "Another one?" she smiled. "Lifts aren't working, by the way. Chief said use the fire stairs." "Oh, great." I leant forward to check for downward traffic before I began my ascent. The tightly angled stairwells in these late 19th century buildings were not designed for anti-grav manoeuvring. In fact, they wouldn't be much use in a fire. At least they'd only burn down to water level these days. Aggie and I, yeah, my inanimate anti-grav pod does have a name, made our way up to what had once been the 19th floor, but was now the 14th above high tide canal level. The fire door at the top opened directly into the warehouse space of Napa Trading, which overflowed the entire 15,000 squares. Rows of metal shelving stretched in every direction, piled with terminals, Nauru engine parts, jacket tools, odd pieces of weaponry and satellite components, cranial fittings, vintage hologram projectors, service bots, vid screens, and even antique radio and TV parts. The reception area was an old Teflon desk with a metre of clear space around it. "What's the deal?" I asked the officer who was ferreting in the apparent havoc. "Place has been ransacked," she said. "I'm looking for clues." "Wouldn't bother," I said. "This place always looked like a lunatic looking for a whippet screw went through at warp speed. Where's..." "Chief's in the back, with the cutter and the deader," she pointed. "The chief? He never leaves HQ. Reckon this case has connections that require his physical participation." I hovered in the general direction of the chief, the coroner and the body, keeping to the dead centre of the aisles in case I brought a century's worth of recycled tech down on my head. The sound of Chief Bascom's gravelly voice biting off orders prompted 2 med techs to scuttle out of the corner office, as if keeping their skin intact depended only on getting out of his reach. This was strange indeed. In 6 years, I hadn't known him to leave HQ, let alone attend a crime scene. "You're scaring the children, Chief," I said from the doorway to the room where Chief Baskin was leaning over the corpse that lay in the crash chair, and Dr. Juan Delta Ann was crawling around on the floor. "Where in Hades have you been?" he bellowed. "Having my toenails buffed," I said. The Chief gave me the once-over from my head to where my feet would be if I had any, and snorted, "And my cat has joined the Space Cadets." I ignored the dig. The casual observer might think the old man didn't like me, but in truth the Chief loves me like a daughter. Okay, like the daughter he never wanted, but he loves me nevertheless. "Why are you so grouchy? After all, that's my uncle you're prodding." I floated over to take a look. "Jimmy Strong's long past caring, and I didn't think you'd give a damn," he stated. True. I looked down at the deceased. Jimmy wasn't really my uncle, that being a scientific impossibility, but he had cohabitated with my Aunt Juno for 5 years, until last summer. She'd insisted I called him uncle, a request I avoided by not calling him anything at all. Poor stupid bastard. He hadn't been good for much when he was alive, and now he was good for nothing at all. Judging from the muscle spasm in the face that contained his vacant eyes, even his brain would be rejected by the organ banks. So, obviously, the 4 of us have travelled many paths in our cross-genre writing. The first question I'm going to ask us is, do you think that picking a genre that is a bit out there, like spec-fic or horror, or even crime in a sense, although that's not as far out as most, is one of the best ways to introduce queer, gay, lesbian, trans, whatever characters to the wider world, or is it just something that you fell into? Like, was it something you chose because it's more acceptable in that sort of genre?
Do you want to go first?
I'll go first. I basically wrote whatever my muse told me to write, and I tend to read a lot more paranormal, so that's where it sort of started. But I guess that's where, not where I'm more comfortable, but that's where I get to play a lot more, because I don't have to, there's no restrictions, I don't have to go, okay, it's contemporary, so I've got to make sure that this is all right, this is all correct. I can make up whatever the hell I want. It's fantastic. And I can make up places, I can make up countries, I can make up whatever I want. It's great. So I get to have a lot more freedom with what I write. And I can, if I don't like this, okay, suddenly the water's going to be pink. Why not? I can do it. I can make it. I have complete control.
But don't you have to have, within that complete control, I mean, you have to have world building that
yes.
is logical and consistent from
yes.
the start of the story to the end of the story.
Yeah, you do. But you still have complete control. You just have to build that world. So it's sort of, it's more fun, I think, because I don't have to go, okay, right, I have to make sure that this actually does belong here, and I can, if I don't like the name of something, it's not like I can't change it. I can go, okay, I don't like that, I'll just change that to this, make this. Yeah, that can go there. It's fun. And it makes it a lot easier, and you just sort of go, well, I just go with the flow, and I go, okay, how did I end up at 30K? Where did I mean, my first story was supposed to be, Ada Shepherd started as a 15K story. That was it. It was supposed to be 15K. Got to 5K, I'm going, okay. Bit more, 10K, okay, yep. 30K later. What the hell? What? That was just supposed to be a one-off. Third book is coming out soon.
Ah, interesting. We'll get to series soon.
Yes.
So, Nigel, you've got the real world, in the sense that
it's not paranormal.
it's not paranormal and it's not even sci-fi. I mean, my story is based in a real world, but a real world that's been affected by climate and other weird things. But yours is set primarily around Sydney.
Sydney and country New South Wales.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, were you able to take any liberties with fictionalising anything, or is it a fair dinkum crime novel where everything is rooted in a completely real sense of place?
Yes, I'd say it's the latter. It's there's a couple of places that I haven't named. Like there's a town out in the country that I didn't name because it was too hard to try and choose one and make it. Like everything else is named, and I went to Dubbo and I went to Parks and Parramatta and Penrith, and just to check out that I got it right. And then there's this one town that, when I was looking at the map from when he was driving from Sydney to Parks, it would have been actually hard to find one, so I didn't name it. And there's another inner west suburb that is actually Ashfield in Sydney, but I didn't want to name it because it meant I could make up shops and that sort of thing.
Next door to me.
Right, yeah.
So you can make up shots, so you've got an element of complete fiction
Yeah,
in there to
that's
enable
right.
the story to work, yeah.
That's right. Mine, it wasn't meant to be a crime thriller when I started it. I had this idea that I wanted to write this kind of family drama. Maybe I had quite pretentious ideas of writing a literary family drama, and about what would happen if you're the person looking after, if a child goes missing, you're the one looking after it, but it's not actually your child. How would that affect your relationship with your brother and your mum and dad? And I can't really remember my thought processes, but I thought this family that accept him as being gay, accept the main character as being gay, suddenly something like this happens, and then out of that comes all their hidden homophobia and that sort of thing. That was the original idea. Turned out to be quite boring, but halfway through my writer's group, I said, no, nothing's really happening. So then things started happening, and then that's when I thought, oh shit, this is actually a crime thriller, and I rewrote it as a crime thriller. So it's kind of lost that slight sense of, it has lost that sense of the family, their homophobia coming out, but certainly the family detail, I think. But anyway, when it was really interesting for me to discover that shift from, you know, what I rather pretentiously thought it was going to be, into something that was very much more a clear genre, but with a gay character.
Yeah, and do you enjoy the genre side of it?
Yeah, I love it actually. Yeah, I love it. I was really surprised that I love it. And I remembered, I thought, oh, well, I've never really read crime fiction, but then I remembered all the crime novels I had read when I was younger, and how much I'd loved them, and how I would race through them, whereas the sort of more literary fiction that I was reading, you know, it'd always be quite an effort. You know, I do like, I do like some literary fiction, but you know, like if I tried to read a book of a prize winner, I'm like, oh, yeah. Do I want to read this on the train, or do I want to put it on my phone? Whereas with crime fiction, I can lap it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, that's my argument against capital L literature, but we won't go there. Genre is so much more fun, and we tend to make a little bit more money, genre writers. Not a lot, because we still don't make any money being writers, but yeah, but it's the whole, you know, much easier to sell a crime novel with any kind of storyline, seriously, than you know.
It's interesting. When I started the first book in the series, I started it, probably about 10, 11, 12 years ago. And when I did the first draft, I got it professionally assessed. And the assessor said to me straight away, oh, you're combining genres. And it's something I never really thought of. I just thought, I'm just writing a story that I want to write. The first book is basically Alan and Warwick, who in the first chapter, they're dead, but they don't know how they died, and they stumble into the theatre district of the afterlife, and it goes from there. And I was on the only other panel I was on, which talked about which one question we were asked what's the difference between a love story and a romance? And I and one of the other guys on the panel said, look, you know, I don't really know. I just wrote what I wanted to write. I didn't think about the genre. I just wrote this sort of esoteric fantasy about it and went on. And he said the same thing. I just lived out a sexual fantasy I had with someone I used to know that never actually happened in real life, but I played it out in my fiction. There was an editor-in-chief from one of the major publishing houses who turned around and she looked at me directly from over there, from probably where Matt is standing now, and said, and clearly told me what a romance novel is, what a love story is, and if you put yourself down as a romance novelist, you have a contract with your readership, and that's what they expect, and all that. And the thing is, I've actually wondered if this is more, I don't know, if in certain countries we're more free about how we mix our genres and how we see it. And the other thing for me too, I'm actually, my background is very much media, so I've grown up exploring cinema, TV shows, and they're allowed to mix genres. Cinema has mixed genres for years.
Forever.
So when I started writing my first book, I just thought, okay, this is a story. This is what I'm writing. Little did I know is that even reviewers and bloggers would start talking about it on, so what actual genre is it? Is it this? It's a little bit of that. I'm thinking, that's not even occurred to me. It's a story. It's a story. Just fall into it and enjoy it.
Yeah, it's like Buffy.
Yeah,
It's everything, isn't it? And people don't
question.
what genre it is, because it's a TV show.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not CSI, and it's not, so it's not realistic, but apart from that, it's, it is what it is.
I was just going to say, maybe in the case of romance, it's the contract with the readers thing is that there's a very specific thing that romance, if they're looking for a romance imprint, they want it to do what it says on the tin. So it's kind of one of those things of, I think that there are some genre situations where it's not about artistic freedom, it's about a very specific product they're looking for. It's the same way that if you trust a chef at a restaurant, of course you want to eat what the chef prepares for you. But if you want a ham and pineapple pizza, you want a ham and pineapple
pizza.
Yeah.
But this is the interesting thing is I think for since the beginning of cinema and television, genres started being mixed. And so people expect that when they go to see it to the cinema, maybe seeing this Cowboys versus Aliens, this B-grade film that was really good. And the main character actually has an emotional arc and grows. And
it was a proper alien film and a proper cowboy film.
And people are happy to accept that. But I say, first book, my two characters are dead. There's a mystery of how they died because they can't remember. One of them was always in love with the other but never told him in life, and here's a second chance to go on. But plus there's an angel, and plus there's this. And then I talk about this one, part of it's in Sydney, parts of it are in the afterlife. The angel's in the middle trying to work out what's going on. He doesn't know about the magical spell going on and why Adam wants to stray. And to me, that's quite normal to write in
That's like ancient mythology. That's like the gods
appearing
in the lives of humans. So that's nothing new at all.
Exactly.
Don't you find though with fiction that when you do that, then people try and give it a name? Like there'll be a category, overall category, say with crime, and then there'll be like subcategories. And as soon as you do anything outside of it, there'll be, oh, that's a new subcategory, let's call it this.
Yes.
There's all these, like, they add little bits on to what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Almost like those academic sociological words.
The librarian in it.
Straight back the librarian!
My first series, my PI trilogy that HarperCollins inexplicably published at the time, good for me. When I set out to write that, I actually set out to write a lesbian private eye novel. Because I specifically wanted to be the Australian Val McDermid. I mean, that was my dream, because at the time Val McDermid had a lesbian series with the Lindsay Gordon series, where she had a lesbian journalist. But at the same time, she also had a straight PI series, which was doing as well. And so off the back of her straight PI series, other people who wouldn't normally read a lesbian PI novel were reading that. And I came along after that wanting to create an Australian character, and we didn't have any in Australia at that time. We had no female PIs, contemporary ones. Kerry Greenwood had already created Phryne Fisher, but she was 1928. So there was one in Sydney that was short-lived. She only had two or three books. And then I came along, and the other thing I wanted to do was make Melbourne a character as well, because as you will know, Nigel, when you're writing realistic crime fiction, the sense of place is seriously important. Whether you're creating a town that you don't name so that you can put shops anywhere you like, or in my case, devising the best lesbian bar on the planet, which no one ever looked for, but two people did look for a park in Elwood that I'd taken the characters to at one stage because they thought it would be a good place to walk their dog. Took me to task afterwards, we couldn't find it. I said, but I set out with a specific thing then to have a lesbian. Remember, this is the late 90s. So a lesbian main character who had absolutely no angst whatsoever about being a lesbian. In fact, she does not use the word, and her friends do not use the word lesbian once in the first book. Someone else does in a derogatory manner about someone they think is a lesbian who isn't. So it's kind of like that. The only time the word gets used is incorrectly. And yet I had like this really long, quite explicit sex scene in there as well, 3/4 of the way through. So what I wanted to do was two things: become Val McDermott, create an Australian character that was ongoing, and with Melbourne as a really strong place, but also do something that a lot of the crime fiction, lesbian crime fiction that was being published in America at the time wasn't doing, and that's have a decent storyline to go with it. And if I do say so myself, better writing. Because what Naiad Press was pumping out at the time was effectively lesbian Mills and Boon. So there was a formula that was being followed, and whether you were writing a romance or a crime novel, it was exactly the same as a Mills and Boon, in the sense that, by this page you had to have a kiss, by this page you had to do that, and none of these characters were happy with there was always angst, and they're always falling for a straight woman, and I did that for the whole falling for the straight woman, but she wasn't actually straight and never had been. It was a thing, she thought she was supposed to be getting married, but the wedding was a setup for something else. So I played on that a little bit.
I just wanted to ask how everyone on the panel feels about when your book is sort of genreized because of the audience, or because of a minority group. Like if you're YA, because if your books are, the genre is young adult, and it doesn't matter what the contents is, or your genre in this case is queer, and no matter what content is, that's put as one of the genres, and how you felt about that, if that was something you sought and embraced, or something you preferred not to.
But do you write for adults or young?
Mine are all, adults.
Adults,
yeah.
And yeah, we all write for adults. But I started writing. I've started writing what I describe as a young adult time-travelling urban fantasy adventure with a queer twist. So, I just wanted to put everything in there. But I was specifically writing for young adults because the characters in them were, 16, 17, 18-year-olds. But I wanted it to be realistic, that if there were two women in there who were going to fall in love, they wouldn't necessarily have explicit sex like in my grown-up books, but it would be there and it would be possible. And so some instances like that, you want the label because you want that audience to read the book. And then in other times you don't want it because, but then sometimes it doesn't matter. I mean, Twilight was written for young adults and all that happened, so.
I just want to say, my first book was with a different publisher to begin with. And I signed the contract, I think, early, right at the end of 2010, and it wasn't going to be released till the end of 2011. And when they were ready to start working with me with the editor, the editor-in-chief sent me the editor's email that she wrote to him saying, "I've read this, but there's no sex in it." And this was a publisher, not a GLBT publisher. But there was this whole thing about no sex continually through this. I mean, there's hints of maybe sex happen and blah, 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 and all this. And added to that was the editor-in-chief's comment. He's like, you call this an erotic novel, you're going to have to work damn hard if you want to see this book. So the other day, and I'm looking at it going, at no stage did I write an erotic novel. At no stage in this contract did we talk about, you took it on my chapter-by-chapter breakdown and the first chapter. Just because it's a gay novel didn't mean. In the end, I did put 3 sex scenes in the first book, which I didn't feel needed to be there. But the first book contract, you don't want to argue too much.
Well, yeah, I just brought it up because I know the singer Janelle Monáe has talked about that when people hear her music and don't see her, they're like, oh, this is really fascinating sort of fusion of electronica and jazz, and it's genre defying, and I don't, you know, it's all of these different things. And then as soon as they see a picture of her, they start putting R&B and rap in what genre it is, and it's, yeah.
But do you think that's more in the US? Like, I adore Janelle Monáe, and I think of her as an artist, and I didn't see the picture. I knew she had dark skin, but I didn't know what she looked like. And the first track I heard was Many Moons, and straight away I was hooked. I think in Australia and in Europe and England, we're less likely to pigeonhole.
Yeah.
You know,
it's like we like what we liked in a sense.
Exactly.
No, what were you going to say?
Oh, well, I was just going to say I was actually very happy to be put into crime thrillers, because for ages, when it became a crime story, I didn't know if it was really good enough to be a crime novel, and certainly didn't know if it was a crime thriller. So even up to a few weeks before it was published, people would say, what sort of book is it? And I'd say, oh, it's kind of like a crime thriller. And then my ex-boyfriend was on the phone and he said, oh, do you know you're already on the Random House website? So I had a look and it said crime thriller. Right, so then I started saying, oh, it's a crime thriller. And then when people started reading it, and were reading it in like a week, or some people read it in a day or 2 days, and I think they're very fast readers, but and I thought, oh, okay, well, it's a crime thriller. So I was really pleased, and if I see it in a bookshop not in crime, I feel like saying to them, yeah, but don't put it in Australia,
that's another. Just one sec, Beck. That's another thing about where you put things, because there's a book out there on the table by Kerry Greenwood, which is out there because I've published it, and because two of the main characters in it are gay. So I figured that people here might like to take a look at it because it's absolutely wonderful. But because on the back of it says something like one of the characters is this, and his lover or something, the teenage general. So there's a mention of the word teenage general. Now, when Kerry first wrote the books, the main characters were like 14 and 15 years old. And I said to her, I understand, you understand, that historically that is quite accurate, and that at 13 or 14 in ancient Egypt, they were men. But the modern world will not understand that. So can we make them a year or so older, because they were still teenagers and all that sort of stuff. She was more than happy for that, just to... But because of that teenage general who was on the back, the first time I saw that book in a bookshop, it was in the YA section, and I said to them, hello, no,
Read it, not YA.
grown up, male sex, not in the young adult. It actually would have been probably quite fine in the young adult, but it wasn't being marketed as that, so I didn't want to have parents going, what is, to a bookshop, what the hell is this book doing here, when it's ostensibly written for grown-ups, but there's actually nothing in it that teenagers shouldn't have, access to.
It's funny you mentioned Twilight, because some of the things that were branded in the Twilight style to draw in the Twilight readership, like Poppy Seabright's Lost Souls would turn up in the young adult section and things like that. And I'm just like,
Beck?
I was just wondering if you find being pigeonholed, as you mentioned before, stifling, because I did some writing back in my early 20s, and it was sort of Ronald Reagan had sort of never killed us all and things like that, so it was all post-apocalyptic, dark, depressing, really pompous crap. Which I am never admitting to writing, if you ever find it. But I found that every time I tried to branch out of that when I was back there, I wasn't allowed to by the people around me. So have you ever sort of wanted to sort of write something just completely different and felt that you can't because of this pigeonhole you've been pushed into?
Well, so that was my first book, and I'm starting on my second, with the same characters at the moment, but based on my previous experience, it might change. And I want to try and stay in the genre. I would love to write other things. I haven't got any sort of contract to write the next book, so they're not demanding anything from me. My fear is more the opposite way around, that I want to stay in that genre, but I've that fear of, can I do it again?
It's okay, you can do it again. You've done it once, you'll be able to do
And
it
you'll grow in
again.
the second one.
And there is second book doldrums, seriously, because your second book is never as good as your first, and your third is always better than your second. And it's all right.
Can I write my third one next?
You can write your third one.
But I do know that, I do remember reading something, advice to writers, be
I
careful
thought for a
when
minute you said, do you remember who I was?
No. Where it said, they said, be careful what your first book is, because you probably will be, you'll be, yeah. So.
What about you?
I'm at the moment working on a project that's not signed up anywhere. It's still in first draft stage, but it's not a GLBT novel. But somehow the main character has turned out bisexual, and when I sort of wrote, there's no sex scenes in it, but when I was trying to have him describing the sexual, nipples as bigger than dollar coins, talking about a woman, and as I was writing, I was like, okay, how do I write exactly about that? And I'm trying to write something outside GLBT, and at the same time, with my publisher, Wild City, they said to me straight away, contemporary books, yeah, we love them. Romance and erotica is our bread and butter. So to do the right thing, I've written just a more traditional. Well, it's not quite. I wouldn't call it traditional because I don't really read traditional romance, and as people say, the formulaic stuff, I've never really read it. But I've written a short ebook just to try to get my name out there more, which they've given me a contract for and won't be available till Christmas. So I'm sort of doing it at the moment just to step outside, and I think that's my personality. I always like to try something new.
Good. I think you should.
Yeah.
Well, that's the bonus these days with being able to, with so many smaller press around, that you can do it. Like Clandestine Press, which I established as a genre publishing company. One of the things, there were two things I wanted to do: find new writers who hadn't been published before, and Australian ones, and fling them out to the world in any genre. And the other thing I wanted to do was to be a home for those authors who wanted to try something different, and their main publishing companies wouldn't let them. For instance, Kerry Greenwood, who has been writing Flying Fisher books, 20 books she's written, and 4 Corinnas, and yet she's making Alan and Unwin a bucket load of money, but they didn't want to publish her ancient history books. So I got them. Yay, am I lucky or what? So, but a name like Kerry Greenwood, and they didn't want to take it on. So, and then I had the same thing after I'd written the 3 O'Malley books for HarperCollins. The publisher there said, oh, can you give us something different this time? And I said, like what? And they said, oh, like a thriller. And I said, what do you mean by a thriller? Because I was writing crime novels, for God's sake. And she said, well, like and I finally worked out that what she meant was not a private eye novel.
Oh.
But in her mind, she was calling it a thriller. She just wanted a crime novel that didn't have a PI in it. It could have had a cop in it, or it could have had no police or anyone in it. And that's what she wanted. And that was, she said, no one's reading crime. There I was, a convener of Sisters in Crime, knowing just how many people are reading crime. And I've got this publisher who clearly didn't know what she was talking about at the time, saying people stop reading crime. But what she was meaning was, private eye novels are sort of last decade, let's have something new. But she just had to give it a whole different name and say thriller.
I was wondering, this is my personal feeling, so I was wondering whether it was echoed in you. My impetus for writing my first novel was I couldn't find anything like that out there that I wanted to read. I wanted this, and I wanted this. For me it was I wanted Australian, I wanted a flamboyant twinkie character, and I wanted a comedy. I couldn't find it, so fine, just write your own. And it worked out well for me, I have to admit that. But was that, when you're doing like the cross of genres, did you find that you wanted paranormal or you wanted this in it and you couldn't find it out there? Anyone?
No, for me, every time someone would go, I would be reading a book and it'd be by an author, and I'd email them and go, oh, I love the book, oh maybe, and I'd start chatting with them, and it's like, oh, they're talking about the next one, so I'm like, oh, maybe you can have this, this, and this. And one of them turned around and said, okay, you write it.
Oh yes, the fan who tells you what to write next.
Well, no,
Yeah.
yes, I do that a lot. Robin knows that. But I was also talking to, because I work as an editor at Ecstasy Books, and I was talking to my editor-in-chief, and she goes, why don't you try writing something? And I went, okay. And so I did. And the first book was done in a month, and I've gone, crap, okay. And then I just can't shut the muse up. So it's been, I think I've had 5 books published in 5 months. So they're short little ones, they're only about 30 kilos. But
That's good.
yeah, I mean, it was surprising, and I'm just going, okay, now how do I shut them up? I have work to do. I need sleep, and in the middle of the night I'm waking up going, okay, Rebel, okay, write down, okay, go to sleep.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, many drunken times with friends, and
Yeah.
this great line comes out, pick up your phone, record it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
don't quite hear what I'm slurring there.
yeah.
Or I'm at work and it's like, okay, I should be working on a script, and here I am sneakily writing books. I'm like, nobody can see me.
Better than Facebook.
More productive too.
I think that's,
Nigel, did you?
Oh, that's fine.
yeah, I was just going to say, better than Facebook. I think it's a great place. Look, man, that was informative. I really, really enjoyed that. You are a wonderful host.
Very
Definitely.
The hostess with the mostess.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very, very
What
much.
about Ghost Reader?
I'm going to say that.